Hey there and welcome. So good to have you with me today. Just want to remind you as we're beginning and invite you to do a couple of things, especially if you're watching this on the replay. That would be to like this video, drop a comment, let me know what you thought of it, share the video, and subscribe to my channel. It just helps to make the videos visible to more people, and that really does help a lot of things move along. Also, I'm going to encourage you to drop comments and questions into the chat box as we go. I try to keep tabs on that so that we can answer questions that are relevant at the right time. When we do an iris assessment, we are looking at several layers of information, and we want to look at them in a very organized step-by-step fashion. The first thing we do is we always look at the basic constitution. Is this person lymphatic, biliary, or hematogenic? And then we want to look at their constitutional subtype. Some people call that subtypes by color. And when we look at each of those, lymphatic, biliary, hematogenic, each of them have specific subtypes or smaller groups of things that we see in an eye that fit into that basic constitution. Then we look at the structural subtype. And so when we're looking, and that's what we're looking at today, we're going to look at one of the 4 structural subtypes that we see in constitutional iridology. When we have these 3 layers of assessment, and that's before we start slicing and dicing and looking at nitty-gritty things, we're going to look at these 3 layers, the constitution, constitutional subtype, and the structural subtype. And we're going to kind of layer them together while we find out what does our client want help with, what are their health goals, and talk about their diet and their lifestyle. Truly, you can make a pretty decent iris assessment just doing that. Going into deeper individual markings and looking at how different markings connect certainly does give you more depth in the assessment. But you know, on a first appointment, we don't even usually need to go that deep to get some good information and some good progress happening. Without the base of constitution, constitutional subtype, and structural subtype, all the other individual little markings have no meaning. They have no value. They have no context. And we need that context. We need to see all of these different layers of information in order to be able to, I'm just going to make that a bit smaller. There we go. In order to be able to actually do a proper assessment and proper recommendations. So looking at this slide, you see that we've got all blue eyes here, but you'll notice that they each have something a little bit different comparing one to the next. Here we have pretty much all of the fibers radiating outwards. They look fairly well organized, almost like somebody combed them. Here we have one where we've still got very organized fibers, but you'll notice that we have wrinkles in the eye. Here we have somewhat organized fibers, but you'll notice that in many places, the fibers look a little more like they're woven, a little tangled. They're kind of bumping into each other all over the place. And in this last one, we have these petal shapes or leaf shapes in the eye. And in this particular case, the leaf shapes are all attached to this ring that comes around in the iris. So these are the 4 structural subtypes we see in constitutional iridology. And today we are going to focus on this one, which is known as the polyglandular subtype. We're going to dive right in, and then I'm going to introduce myself in a few minutes. And so we're going to look at lots of eyes. I'll introduce myself, and then we'll look at lots more eyes. When we are looking at structural subtypes, and particularly polyglandular today, we're just going to be able to skim the surface. This is actually a part of the 3rd module in the Dynamic Iridology Assessment System course. These, when we're describing the polyglandular type, again, we have many of these leaf or petal shapes. We call them lacunae, and they will be attached to this fiber that is weaving its way around. This fiber is called the collarette. This arrangement of having many of these lacunae attached to the collarette, let me rephrase that, having lacunae attached to the collarette and not really having lacunae anywhere else in the eye suggests to us that this person, amongst other things, has a strong predisposition towards general hormone imbalances. And we can even get into specific hormone imbalances with this. These are the eyes of a 20-year-old female. She came in to see me with dysmenorrhea, so extremely painful periods. Her menstrual cycle started when she was 16, which is considered a little bit late. Her cycles average 35 to 60 days apart, so from day 1 to day 1. And she has debilitating cramps for 4 days before her menses begins and for the first 4 days of her menses as well. Now, I have had to wonder, and I still do wonder, if she is actually edging into polycystic ovarian syndrome. Now, I'm not a medical doctor, so I can't diagnose that, but I can certainly ask questions. She finds she has to eat very frequently. She has, on her doctor's advice and prescription, has used naproxen, Tylenol, and Advil for these menstrual cramps. And she finds that nothing is working anymore. The naproxen used to work, but it doesn't work anymore. She has many food sensitivities, including milk and gluten. And when she eats fatty foods, they give her diarrhea. So what did I do with this young lady? She was quite motivated and she's quite diligent with homework, which is really great. So I suggested that she might want to increase the number and size of her protein servings every day. She was not eating nearly as much protein as I think a young woman should be eating. And I suggested reducing her carbohydrates a little bit. Because she is gluten sensitive, she was doing a lot of the gluten-free foods, which tends to be extremely high carbohydrate. Lakita says, you just described every woman. Oh my goodness, I hope not. I hope not, Lakita. And so what I did is I recommended a mineral supplement, and I recommended a herbal formula specifically for hormones. And I also suggested some omega-3 and vitamin D3. Now, where I live north of the 49th parallel, and so does this young woman, which means that in the wintertime, especially, our sun is 1/10 the strength that it is in the summertime. And in the wintertime, we get maybe 8 hours of sunlight, with about 6 of that being decent sunlight. Quite a different picture in the summertime. But in the wintertime, our vitamin D always takes a serious nosedive. So with these recommendations of increasing the number and size of protein servings, adding more minerals into her diet, reducing her refined carbs in the form of the gluten-free products, and using a herbal blend to help with the menstrual issues, the omega-3 and the vitamin D, we found that her cycle settled down. Took a few months for it to really kick in, but we got it to where she was settling down to a cycle that was 5 weeks, which is doable, that's manageable, right? And that the cramping had reduced from 8 days of holy terror down to 1 to 2 days of moderate cramping. So significant improvement, with still a little bit of room to go, but she was really, really happy with the progress we made. Now, again, when I understand polyglandular and I understand that risk of hormonal imbalances, and I know that insulin is a hormone, and I know that insulin resistance is a part of PCOS, you can see where I'm going here and why I'm thinking in the back of my brain, we might be working with polycystic ovarian syndrome. It's not that these markings say she has PCOS and they don't say she has insulin resistance. It's these markings with an understanding of anatomy and physiology and understanding her symptoms that help me to understand where we need to go. Now, using her eyes again, I had an email recently from someone who said that she believed that all of these lacunae meant the person was incredibly toxic and needed to be cleansed right now and very deeply. And she implied that in doing that, we could get rid of these markings. And I'm going to tell you that that is not the truth. After 4 decades in this industry, I can tell you conclusively that we do not get rid of lacunae in an iris. This is the same eye taken on the same day. I had gotten a new camera and this client came in, and bless her heart, I said, I want to do some comparison photos. I want to shoot photos with my old camera. And actually it was the same camera. It was a different lighting setup. And you can tell the different lighting setup because of this. Am I lying? I am lying. I'm sorry. This was a different camera. This was an older camera, and this was the replacement camera. So we did these photos on the same day. And you can see that changing the camera and changing the light changes many things in the photo. And this is so, so important. When we are doing before and after photos, we must keep everything consistent. The equipment, the lighting, lighting source, lighting quality, amount of lighting, intensity of lighting, shutter speed, f-stop. We've got to keep every parameter. Room lighting has got to be controlled exactly the same way. So this older camera had a much brighter light. I'm sorry, a much dimmer light. I'm getting my thoughts tangled. A much dimmer light, which allows the pupil to be much larger, right? When that pupil is large, the iris tissue compresses. When it compresses, its shape looks like it's changed. I want you to think of this like a balloon that you would make party animals out of, right? Or any balloon. If I've got a balloon that's full of air, I can squeeze it and it changes the shape, but it doesn't actually change the volume of air. When I let go, the shape restores to its natural shape, but we still have not changed the volume of air. So as we look at these photos going across, that's exactly what has happened. As we've squeezed this tissue, compressed this tissue, it appears to have changed the shape, but the volume is the same. As the pupil gets smaller, that light is getting a little bit brighter. The lacuna shape changes a bit. With the brightest light, the pupil is the smallest. It allows the tissue of the iris to stretch out, which is going to change slightly how this is sitting. But these are genetic, and we do not change these. And so with this, what we need to recognize is that cleansing is not going to change anything we see in the eyes. And the purpose of the cleanse is not to change the eyes. The purpose of the cleanse would be to change the symptoms. Lakita says, I would advise liver detox as well, especially if she wasn't born with a gluten allergy. Another indication of liver detox is due to meds not working anymore. Absolutely. So working to clean up her liver is a good idea to make everything else work better, because we know the liver does about 650 different jobs in the body, but we're not doing it to change her eyes because it's not going to change her eyes. Here's another client, another beautiful example of a polyglandular eye. So remember that the polyglandular person is predisposed to hormonal imbalances, including insulin and cortisol. Also remember that our polyglandular people tend to be very creative. They tend to have a really good creative streak. So this is a female, age 65. She has a history of depression. She's extremely health conscious, but her weight has crept up. Very diet conscious, strict vegan. As her weight is creeping up, she's been feeling more and more lethargic. She has a sedentary lifestyle, which when she's health conscious, she knows a lot. She's just not doing everything that she can or should be doing. She's had a lot of stress in her life, and especially recently, she's had more stress. So just like we did with the young lady previously, we needed to bump up this woman's protein content. Now, one of our challenges with a lot of the vegan proteins is they also tend to be pretty high in different kinds of carbs, and that can be a conflicting factor here. So we needed to support her protein digestion. That was a really important thing for us to do. We can see from her eyes that she likely doesn't handle proteins very well. And so we added to her a product called Protein Digestive Aid, which is from Nature Sunshine. That's the Canadian name. In the US, that same product is called PDA. And I encouraged her to go for a walk every day. Wasn't going to do a lot with her diet to begin with because there were some lifestyle things that needed to be put in place in order for any significant dietary changes to actually have an impact. One of the things that I asked her was, what does she do to express her creativity? And her answer was nothing. I've been too stressed and too busy. So then I changed the question. What would you like to do? What is something that gives you pleasure, that gives you joy, that when you're doing this creative thing, it just fills your soul? And she said she really loves drawing and taking photographs of tiny things she would see when she would be out on walks. Well, she hasn't been walking lately, right? She hasn't been going to the park for walks. So a part of her homework that I gave her was to start walking daily, but also to get a little pocket-sized sketchbook and whatever kinds of tools she needed to go with that, some charcoals or pencil crayons or just a lead pencil, whatever, and to go for her walks. And as she saw something that intrigued her, and she said it was usually the tiniest things, little tiny flowers or a little tiny leaf that was out of place or something like that. I said, I want you to take 5 minutes on your walk, find that one thing, draw it, sketch it. No one's going to look at this. This isn't for you to sell. This isn't for everyone to go, ooh, you're such a good artist. This is for you to fill your soul. So if it's going to be abstract and nobody else can recognize what it is, that's perfectly fine. If it wants to be very realistic, that's perfectly fine too. Because she was not expressing her creativity. She was not expressing her emotion. She was letting all of the stress and all of the busyness make it so that she was tamping down everything and not making time and room for herself. So I sent her off for 2 months. I usually do 1 month. She lives out of town. 2 months was the soonest I could get her in again. And her results, it was just remarkable. She said that just from going for a daily walk and doing this little drawing project, again, helping her express her creativity, helping her speak to her own soul, she found that the drawing was making her go for walks. She was getting excited about, what will I see? What will I draw today? That was getting her to go for walks. And because she was filling her well, she was filling her soul, she was getting some activity, some sunshine, some fresh air. She was taking time to nurture herself. She noticed her energy was starting to improve. I think this is so important because it is testament to the fact that not every solution we offer is going to be a food or a pill, right? Sometimes the solutions are more heart-based, soul-based. Once we get the heart and soul coming along, then if we need to go in with the more physical things, we can do that. This is a male, age 51. Now, you'll notice a stark contrast from him to the previous pictures we've looked at. He doesn't have as many lacunae, but he's got a few. And they're again attached to the collarette. So there's enough of them that we can call him polyglandular. Lakita says it takes energy to produce energy in the mitochondria. It absolutely does. It absolutely does. With this gentleman, again, age 51, he's 5 feet 8 inches tall and weighs 170 pounds. He's an aircraft mechanic. He came in to me because he was having problems with eczema or eczema, depending on how you pronounce that where you live. It had started about 10 years ago and was diagnosed by his doctor as being a fungus that he'd picked up from his hockey equipment. Now, I don't know if you know much about hockey where you live. Here it is, if you don't play hockey, you're nobody kind of thing. And so we've got all of these people in all these recreational hockey leagues, and their equipment gets sweaty and stinky and gross, and they often don't get it cleaned. There are a few businesses that specialize in decontaminating hockey equipment. Well, like so many guys, his equipment hadn't been cleaned in a long time, and it started to harbor funguses. And that is what he got into his skin that gave him eczema. And it had spread from the areas where his hockey pads and hockey equipment would touch to his entire body. Now, he has a very active lifestyle. He does a lot of things. He gave up hockey when his skin got so bad and when he realized it was the equipment that was doing it. And he's got a lot of other things that he does. Now, again, remember that polyglandular is just one layer of information here. The way his lacunae are placed, some of them suggest an increased risk of pancreatic imbalance. That could lead to blood sugar imbalances, insulin resistance. Now, also, as an airplane mechanic, a jet mechanic, he works for one of the major airlines here in Canada. He's exposed to solvents and cleaning agents and hydraulic fluids and coolants and fuels. Now, you know, whether he's touching them, whether they're landing on his skin anywhere on his body, or whether he's inhaling the fumes, it doesn't matter. He's still getting exposed to them. Also in his symptoms, he has intense chronic heartburn. And as he described, he can have really foul gas. So if there is a blood sugar imbalance, then that is going to increase the risk of him holding on to fungi. And that would mean that for him, the skin is simply a messenger. Yes, he was exposed at a skin level. If his blood sugars and his immune system and his liver were doing what they need to be doing, they could have likely fought it off, at least somewhat. But in his case, I suspect they were not capable of it. His stomach zone also is not as robust as we would like it to be, but that's genetic again, and we can work with that. It does suggest the possibility of poor protein digestion and therefore poor amino acid assimilation. Now, when we think about how all of this works together, we need to think about the stomach. We need to think about the liver. He's got some liver indicators as well. And then we need to think about how does all that work with these lacunae that are suggesting blood sugar imbalance and the possibility of some insulin resistance here. So we started right at that stomach level, because if you're not digesting, you're not going to repair anything, right? So we suggested cutting out his coffee, because that's really hard on the stomach lining. And when we consume coffee orally, it's really hard on the liver. So we got rid of the coffee. And this is in his first appointment. We added parsley as a very gentle blood purifier and a little bit of a gentle liver support. We didn't go heavy duty with him there. We added omega-3, which is critical for so many things in the body. We added 1 cup of dandelion root tea. There's your more heavy duty liver support and purification. We added zinc, right? Because zinc is key for the immune and for the skin. And we added N-acetylcysteine because it helps the liver with phase 1 and phase 2 detoxification. Over the next 4 weeks, so when I saw him at the 4-week mark again, he said that the heartburn was just about gone, like almost never. And if it happened, it was really, really minor and didn't last very long. So that's great. The coffee was a huge part of that remedy. And his skin was starting to show improvement. It was certainly much less angry. He was so pleased with how it was calming down. So again, understanding that the reason why the fungus was allowed to survive was because of possible insulin resistance. And with the improvement we saw, we were then able to build more on that. And now we could work specifically on the insulin resistance end of things. We could work with balancing his blood sugars, tweaking his diet to get it to where he was no longer responding in a way that would allow him to harbor fungi and yeast and things like that. So again, when we are looking at an eye, the structural subtype is just one layer. We have to consider that base constitution. We have to consider the constitutional subtype, and then we also have to consider the structural subtype. And then we can also consider what's going on in the sclera as well. We are going to find out what our client's symptoms are. What do they want our help with? We're going to layer that up with what we see in the eyes and use that to help guide our questions and our protocol formation. And we want to be very aware that it's probably going to take several appointments to build the protocol step by step, several appointments, because that gives the client time to ingrain the changes and make them lifestyle. Level 1 and level 2 detox, Lakita, is all about the phases that the liver takes toxins through to break them down to where they can be, the metabolites can be put back into the bloodstream for the kidneys to remove. If either phase 1 or phase 2 is not working properly, there's no purpose in detoxing the liver, because it's not going to work right. You got to get phase 1 and phase 2 working in order for liver detox to happen properly. So I got into holistic healing over 4 decades ago, my goodness, 45 years ago, and got into it because I had health problems and the doctors weren't giving me answers. Coincidentally, met a young man who happened to know some things, and his mother knew more things, and fell in love with that guy. And here we are. This summer, we'll be celebrating our 44th wedding anniversary, which we're pretty stoked about that one. But along the way, I've studied a lot. Obviously, you have to, right? I am one of only 8 level 3 IPA certified iridology instructors, and I've been an iridologist for decades. IPA issues new badges every 2 years as we provide our update credentials, and so these are my most recent badges for my level 3. And thank you, Lakita. Thank you so much. Over the years, I've also become a master herbalist and a natural nutrition clinical practitioner, and I'm professionally affiliated with these 3 organizations. I've designed and taught many different kinds of courses to do with holistic healing. For a while, I was a certified prenatal educator. That was a ton of fun, teaching antenatal classes. And I've designed and taught a lot of herbal courses and a lot of nutrition courses and things like that. And now I roll a lot of that into the dynamic iridology assessment system course and into other courses that I do still currently offer. So just as a heads up, before we look at a few more eyes, the next go around, the next cohort of the dynamic iridology assessment system course for health professionals will be starting on June 27th. And so just keep that date in mind. We'll give you a few more details about the course in a moment. This course is open to people who have completed a college level anatomy and physiology course with a grade over 80%. Now, why would I do that? Because that is one of the prerequisites to certify with IPA. So my course will give you all of the curriculum and mentoring you need to do the certification process with IPA, but they will also require proof of the anatomy and physiology. Now, the other reason I require it is because I assume my students know how the body works, and on a much deeper level than the liver detoxifies, right? And so my experience has been that when I used to let anybody enroll in the course, students who did not have college level anatomy and physiology would get snowballed by about the 6th lesson, and they would drop out. That is not my end goal. I don't want the tuition from students who are not ready to be in the course. So if you need an anatomy and physiology course, let me know, and I will send you a link to the one that I recommend. and I don't get commission for recommending them. I only wish I did. I'd be rich by now. But it's a good course, and you can get in there and you can get it done, and that will be your pre-qualification to speak with me then about the dynamic iridology course. Elaine Hedden is a holistic physiotherapist. She's in Alaska. And this is what she said. I'm a holistic physical therapist and wanted to study iridology for years, but just couldn't find the right instructor or school. Judith Cobb's iridology course has been the perfect fit. The caliber and organization of the coursework is professional. Her depth and breadth of knowledge of iridology, herbals, nutrition, and pathology is beyond most instructors and even some university professors. If you are a health professional wanting to expand your scope of practice by learning about the most up-to-date information on iridology, take the 20-week level 1 and level 2 class from Judith Cobb, worth every penny and every minute. Level 1 and level 2 is how the International Iridology Practitioners Association has outlined the curriculum. I call it dynamic iridology. So here we go. Hematogenic eyes. How many of you have some iridology background and feel like, let's start with that. How many of you have some iridology background? You've studied a little bit here or there, you know a bit of it. Okay, Nancy does. Good job, Nancy. Nancy, I'm going to put you on the hot seat here. Do you find dark brown eyes difficult to assess? If you do, give me a yes in the chat box. Okay. A lot of my students, when they come in, whether they've got previous training or not, find dark brown eyes difficult to assess. This is why you want to have eventually, not right at the beginning of a course, but by the time you are certified, you want to have proper iridology equipment. Because when you've got good iridology equipment and you take those photos into a photo editor, you can add more light to the photo and you can then see so much more detail. Okay, so these eyes are polyglandular. So what we need to remember is, as I'm going through this case history, is that as a practitioner, every person we work with, we don't necessarily end up where we want to with them. Okay, oftentimes the clients that I see, I am their last ditch attempt. They have gone to every medical doctor they can think of. They've gone everywhere they can think of to try to find an answer, and I am the last ditch attempt. And it's like, oh my goodness, if I'd been the first ditch attempt, we might have got some better progress, but here we are, last ditch attempt. This is a female, she's 30 years of age. She's 5 feet 6 inches tall and weighs 176 pounds. So she is overweight. The doctor has diagnosed her with polycystic ovarian syndrome and with elevated cholesterol and elevated triglycerides. Over the course of a day, her whole body puffs up. Anytime there's an odor and she gets a whiff of it, she will end up with an ear infection and with headaches and a sore throat. So she can almost not even leave her house. Perfumes, cigarette smoke, cannabis smoke, you name it. No way is she going down the detergent aisle at the grocery store, right? Her bones hurt. She's always tired. She has problems sleeping. She is in a constant state of a mild panic attack. She always feels like her adrenaline is surging and that anxious feeling. So we started her on a really, really gentle program. It was a Candida protocol. So what we were doing is taking away anything that would feed yeast, right? We added 1 capsule of a methylated B formula. We added 2 capsules of N-acetylcysteine. No, it was just 1 because it was a fairly strong one. It was 900 milligrams. And we did 2 capsules of an anti-yeast product, something to help kill off the yeast. By the 3-week mark, she was covered in rashes. And she didn't let me know she was having symptoms develop until she was covered. So here again, this would have been an ideal situation to do some liver work, but we would have had to go very, very gently. We see that with her polyglandular predisposition, hormones want to be unbalanced. Likely with the PCOS, she was insulin resistant and likely very full of candida. So the rashing was likely a response to the candida die-off, and it has to happen, right? We've got to have the die-off of the excess of the yeast, and the rash is the response to the toxins that are produced when the yeast dies off. So putting in a little bit of something to support the yeast or support the liver in this die-off could have been helpful. Maybe starting with just the diet and none of the supplements might have given us a slower start and might have been helpful. I also now have the question mark. I saw her about 5 years ago, but I have the question mark in my brain of how much of this was also histamine intolerance. Right. So now I might consider seeing if a DAO enzyme would have been helpful for her as well. So there's a lot of different things that we could have done had she alerted me early on that she was starting to develop rashes. Okay. So because we didn't have that chance to intervene in the protocol early on and back away from things and let her body calm down and come at it from a more gentle perspective, she gave up, and that was it. That was it. So that's very, very sad. But again, we can see those polyglandular predispositions in here. And knowing that she's got a PCOS diagnosis from her doctor, we can build on that as well. Does that make sense? Lakita's saying food and herbs will produce die-off at the same rate. And yes, it makes sense. Absolutely. So, we just needed to go in possibly a little more gently, but I would have liked to have explored the histamine intolerance route as well, because that could certainly be a part of the issue. Here we have another polyglandular, and you will notice with these eyes that, that we've got lots of these lacunae attached to the collarette. Okay. Interesting that so many of them are in similar placements. This is a female, 5 feet 9 inches tall, 197 pounds. She is polyglandular. So again, we're wondering about blood sugars and all of the different hormones the body creates. We've got lacunae sitting in the kidney and adrenal reaction field in both eyes. For the past 5 years, she has been constantly bloated and bloating to the point where she has gut pain. She gains weight very easily, which again does suggest insulin resistance or candida. Insulin resistance is actually the true pandemic. Okay. We've been told that type 2 diabetes by the year 2030, approximately 30% of all adults will be type 2 diabetic if we don't do something about it now. This client has frequent migraines, and we're talking migraines every few days with vertigo and dizziness. She has fibrocystic breasts. She has a yeast or bladder infection after every menses. So there is some kind of an infection showing up every month with her cycle. She's been diagnosed as hypothyroid and as having Raynaud's disease, which is, of course, a circulatory symptom. And my experience has been that it's from an adrenal gland insufficiency. Her bowels are sluggish. Without coffee, she has 1 bowel movement every 3 days. With coffee, she has 1 bowel movement per day. That doesn't mean coffee is good for her. So again, I really like to use my anti-candida program on people or with people who have that risk of being insulin resistant. It's a low carbohydrate program that tends to clean things up and bring balance in very quickly. So that's what we did with her. I recommended and outlined for her the anti-candida program, just the food portion. I didn't even go into too many supplements with her, because the anti-candida program for a woman who is of European extraction is a pretty drastic shift from white flour and heavy foods and lots of sugary refined stuff in there. Over the course of that first month, with being on the anti-candida program, and again, we're doing this to balance the blood sugars, to work with those the insulin resistance. So we're going back through the hormones, right? She'd only had one headache since starting, which is remarkable, because we're talking debilitating migraines that medications would sometimes take the edge off, but they would never completely take away from her. She had one headache in the month that she was on the program. She was having much better energy, one bowel movement per day without coffee. So that's huge. That's huge. She was not bloated anymore. She had no more cravings for carbs, and she felt like her energy was back up to where she had started working out again. And by removing those foods that would trigger the insulin resistance and the candida, she had no more bladder issues and no more vaginal yeast infections. It was a pretty easy fix. Akita says coffee plus grains equals daily migraines. For some people, it certainly does. Some people can get away with it, but for her, this client, no way. Absolutely no way. And so again, the remedy for her, the solution for her wasn't a lot of pills. It was educating her about diet and dietary choices. Now, this woman on the left is Anita Berger. She is a herbalist and she is a certified iridologist. She's one of my grads. This is what she said about the course. This is after she had certified. She'd completed all of the certification steps. One significant observation: the way the class is laid out and taught, and the way I chose to keep engaged and caught up, I have retained significantly more than I have in other classes I've taken. Feel free to use this in part or whole or revised in any of your marketing. So the way the course is actually structured really helped her to retain the information. And that was great. That was great. So again, the next live course is starting on June 27th. And if you've got that anatomy and physiology under your belt and you're wanting more information, you'll want to grab this link. And I should have put this in where I could copy and paste it, but I did not. Let me just try to do this. There we go. Make sure I don't have a typo in there. We're going to send that out. So that's now in your chat box. This link will give you the basic information about the course. And if that sounds like, I'm going to give you some more of it here too. If it sounds like, yeah, I'm serious about wanting more information, I think I want to look at the possibility of enrolling, then on this page, there is a link for you to schedule a time to speak with me about enrolling. I speak with every student prior to enrollment. I want to make sure that the course is a good fit for them. Remember, at the beginning, we said if you don't have ANP, likely you're going to drop out. The purpose of this call is to make sure to really stack the deck in your favor, that you're going to complete the course. Whether you certify or not, that's up to you. And I will help you if you decide you want to certify. But course completion is the first goal. So if you're wondering if this course would be a good fit for you, grab that link, have a look at it. And if it looks like, yeah, you want to look at this further, then schedule a time to chat with me. And we'll talk about where you're at, where you want to go. Do you have the prerequisite? We'll give you the details you need. Okay. And so I only take 10 students per class maximum. I know some teachers will take 20, 30, 40. I only take 10 because it's important that you have that one-on-one attention. And I can't mentor 20 or 30 or 40 students at a time, right? And I want to make sure I can mentor you. The Dynamic Iridology Assessment System is the only live, online, fully mentored course for anyone who has a college-level anatomy and physiology class under their belt already, who wants to incorporate iridology into their holistic practice, but they want to be able to also streamline their client work without sacrificing client care. Too often I've seen iridologists and other health professionals meet with their client, gather information, then go off and spend 2 or 3 or 4 hours of their own time combing through everything to create a report and a protocol to bring back to their client. Chances are 9 out of 10, you're not getting paid for those extra hours. You're donating them. That's not a good business model, right? Not a good business model at all. So with dynamic iridology, the idea here is to cut out that unpaid homework to help you learn how to do an accurate and appropriate assessment in your paid client time and create the protocol your client needs for the next step while you're with them. No more unpaid homework for you. When we do our programs this way, we don't overwhelm our clients. And if we don't overwhelm them, they have greater success with the homework we've given them, better compliance, which means better results, which means they want to come back and see you. I guarantee you, if you give a client more homework than they can handle, they're not coming back. They don't want to tell you they couldn't do it. But if you give them meaningful homework in incremental steps, that they can do this step for this next 4 weeks, then we're going to build on it with more steps after that and more steps after that. As they have success in accomplishing that, they want to come back and they want to tell you that they were successful. They want to find out what's the next step. They want to tell you how they're feeling better, what improvements they're seeing for those few little bits of homework you gave them to do. The goal of the course is to teach you constitutional iridology and how to use it confidently so you can easily integrate what you already know about nutrition or herbology or physical therapy, like we saw from Elaine Hedden, so that you can confidently create doable client programs in your paid client sessions. I'm just going to put a plug in here. I've had students come to me into this course who have certified as iridologists with IPA or through other organizations. And why they came into my course is, yeah, they could identify individual markings. Yes, they could spew back facts that they had learned, but what they had not learned was how to actually use it. They had not been given the practical application. And that is one thing that I really work with in the course, is to make sure that my students get not just the nuts and bolts, here's the markers, but the application of how do these markers work together? When we see that symptom, which of these markers are going to be important? What will be the dietary recommendations we want to consider making here? What would be maybe some ideas of some herbal things that we would incorporate, right? Not that I'm teaching nutrition or herbology here, but I do draw that in so that if you've got that as a background, you can begin seeing how those things integrate with iridology to create a package deal. So one more time, there's the information for you. If you think that if you're even remotely thinking that iridology is the next step in your educational process, grab that link that I posted in the chat box, schedule a time to chat with me, and let's talk about it. Now, some of you've already had a call, but it's been a while. Maybe now is the time for you to enroll in the course. If it is, feel free to schedule another Zoom meeting, a Zoom call with me, and let's have another chat and see if this is a good fit. So with that, I appreciated the comments that people were dropping into the chat box. Thank you so much for that. Very good to see the interaction. And I hope to be chatting with you soon about the course. Take good care and have a fabulous rest of your day. Bye for now.